broadcaster Benjamin Butterworth and entertainment and royal correspondent of The Telegraph, India McTaggart. A very good morning and Merry Christmas to you both. Before we get into their individual stories, have a look at the pages this morning. The Eye writes that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, needs a Christmas miracle to boost the economy. The same stories on the front of the FT as the Chancellor admits she has a huge task to turn around the economy in the new year. The Express leads with the King's Christmas message of unity and hope. The King's also on the front of the Mail, which features his choice of an ex-hospital chapel for this year's Christmas speech and a message of national healing. The same stories on the front of the Sun. The Telegraph writes of reports that Royal Mail staff have been accused of faking deliveries to hit targets for bonuses. The Guardian, meanwhile, says it can exclusively reveal that Thames Water intentionally diverted millions of pounds pledged for environmental clean-ups towards other costs, including bonuses. And the Mirror reports that 7 in 10 people want a bank holiday to mark 80 years since the end of World War II. And on the front of the Times, more than 10,000 serving sailors, soldiers and aircrew cannot go to war because they've been declared medically unfit. The Daily Star warns of a Christmas internet overload as thousands of people across the country watch and stream content online. So that's the summary of all the main stories, and over the next few hours we'll dive into the stories that in particular have captured India and Benjamin's attention. And India, we're kicking off with you picking out the Daily Mail and in fact their front page.
Yes, so as you mentioned just now, a lot of newspapers are splashing on the fact that for the first time in 18 years, the King has chosen to record his Christmas broadcast, or the monarch's Christmas broadcast, outside of royal residences. So he's chosen a former hospital chapel for this year, and that may seem like an eccentric choice, but actually it's completely in keeping with the King's modus operandi for a multitude of reasons. The first is the healthcare link obviously marks the healthcare challenges that have faced the royal family this year, from his cancer diagnoses to the Princess of Wales, to the recent bout of pneumonia that Camilla had, Princess Anne's mysterious head injury. There's been a lot that's faced them this year in terms of health challenges. So we've got that link. It's also non-denominational, so he can reach those of all faiths and none, which is very key to his messaging always as defender of all faiths. And it's also supposed to reflect his speech, which we don't know in advance, but it's anticipated that he's going to dwell on the theme of community and cohesion. And I think in particular, the way the UK came together, as the Mail points out, after the Southport murders and riots. So that's going to be mentioned. So it's sort of all in keeping with his themes and what he wants to reflect on this year. Also, it does have a royal link, the Fitzrovia Chapel, that is, because Charles's grandfather actually laid the foundation stone there in 1928. So, of course, it does have that special link. And we've got quite high hopes for his speech, right? I mean, he's done a few, obviously, King's Christmas Day speeches, his coronation speech. He's struck the chord quite well. He really typically does, and this is his third one, his third Christmas broadcast. And, of course, after such an extraordinary year, we would expect it to be quite a powerful, quite a moving one, and just to reflect on sort of the year that's been unlike any other in royal news.
Benjamin, you've gone for the front page of the Eye, which I guess we've already shown, but focusing on the need for a Christmas miracle for the Chancellor.
Yeah, a little less uplifting than the King's message of optimism, but an economist has said that she needs a Christmas miracle, and this is on the back of the economic figures for July to September, which showed flatlining growth and no growth, only put down from 0.1 and 0.2%, so not dramatically different from what had been forecast already. But it shows the nature of the problem that the government has in the new year, because it's expected that for the 3 months we're in now, it will also be flatlining. And this is very disappointing, given that at the general election, they said the goal was to have the highest economic growth in the G7. Now they've kind of adjusted that goal down to in Europe. And I think that a lot of businesses will be going into the new year concerned about this situation. There was a story out yesterday that confidence in the UK economy from business leaders is almost as low as it was during COVID. So that's quite a dramatic shift. And I think what Rachel Reeves has to do is maybe have a bit of the King's optimism, right? There is a sense of misery or of fear that more tax rises or maybe spending cuts if this stagnation lasts. And I think that, Keir Starmer has talked about the fact he wants to get people's disposable incomes up. That's something that they probably need to draw on as the new year comes in.
I think the economy next year will be the story for the government, and be very interesting to see how it plays out for all of us, of course, not just for the government. We've gone on, India, to the Guardian next, and you're focusing on the pretty extraordinary story about Matt Gaetz.
Isn't it just? I mean, Trump's first pick for Attorney General, the man chosen to lead the Department of Justice, has been found to have engaged in sex trafficking and paid for sex with a minor in a House of Representatives Ethics Committee report. I mean, as you say, it's pretty extraordinary. It says that the former Florida congressman was found to have made payments totaling tens of thousands to women for sex and drugs on at least 20 occasions, and all claims that he emphatically denies, I should point out. But this is a sort of very damaging pick from Trump to be the country's chief law enforcement officer. And it makes clear he wanted, I think, to overhaul the DOJ after claims that it's sort of been weaponized against him and other outspoken conservatives. And of course, that's the line that Gaetz is taking now. He's sort of saying, this is because I'm an outspoken conservative and this is a fishing expedition and a witch hunt. And he sort of described his behavior previously as womanizing, saying it was embarrassing, but really not taking any culpability. And
of course, the significant thing at this stage is that the report, which, as you said, is just a committee ethics report, was at least published. He stood down from his position once he was nominated, before it was withdrawn for Attorney General, and was trying to fight it even being produced. So it's the significant thing is, I guess, that we do get those details and see them, as you said, that he has designed. Benjamin, we're on to the front of the Times next, and this story that we also already teased, a fifth of the forces can't be relied on to fight.
Yeah, I find this absolutely extraordinary. So, according to figures that have come out, 10,000 serving soldiers are not in a fit state to serve. 15,000 can't go out if there is too extremely cold, too hot, the noise too extreme. And there are warnings that we're in no fit state for the armed forces. It's going to be less than 70,000 soldiers in the new year as the numbers continue to fall. And we were discussing this before, weren't we? How can you have a situation, it also names 3,000 sailors can't go to sea. I mean, it puzzles me utterly of how you can have a situation where so many people in the armed forces are not capable of going out to fight, to do the job that they're in training for. And it points out in this story, I mean, let's hope nothing like this ever happens, but if we were to lose troops at the rate that Russia has lost troops in Ukraine, then the entire armed forces, the entire soldiers, rather, would be wiped out in just over 1 month.
Well, I mean, that's a very different situation, I guess, than the gist of the story.
It gives you a sense of the context, though, of the concern that armed forces leaders are expressing, that not only is the number in total so low, but the number of them that aren't ready to fight if something awful were to happen. And we live in particularly unpredictable times.
One of the factors you said there, Benjamin, is if it's too loud.
Yes, yeah, it references that noise and temperature are issues for which 15,000 soldiers have mitigation of whether they would have to go out to fight. Yeah. And you sort of wonder whether, maybe they have serious issues with that. But if they do, then are they in the right role? Is that an appropriate thing for us to rely on those individuals? I find it extraordinary.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, we are in times where this is quite important. Yeah. I mean, a few years ago, we probably wouldn't have thought that the number of ground troops one has is actually quite significant, but it seems that it is.
And it's 16,000 of 71,000 in total. So that's a really serious number.
It is. And those numbers, just the headline numbers, as you said, been steadily declining since the sort of early part of the century when numbers were much higher with two wars obviously going on in the Middle East. We've got time just to squeeze one more in, India. You're sticking with the Times front page?
Yes, sticking with the Times. I thought this was quite fun. This is a study by researchers at California Institute of Technology, and they have found that the human brain processes thoughts that only millions of the speed at which information is transmitted over the internet. So it's quite unsurprising, but they were essentially just assessing the speed of conscious thought by examining data on human behavior such as reading, writing, and solving Rubik's Cubes. Find, however, that our brains process sensory information much more quickly. It's just the actual sort of then translation into...
It's only going to get worse from here, isn't it? As well, with sort of more computing power and AI, are we just going to be further left behind?
And actually, I mean, Interestingly, the point they make, the researchers make, is that this speed limit on thinking means that the idea that sort of Elon Musk has put forward, that we can use computers to increase the speed of our brains, won't actually work. So that was quite an interesting tidbit.
I think some people in rural communities will be disputing that the internet speed is so fast.
That is a good point.
Yeah, that's a very good optimistic pivot at the end, that we're not that bad after all. We'll leave the paper review there for this hour, but India and Benjamin, we'll see you both again next hour. Looking forward to it. We're going to take a very quick break here on the breakfast show this Christmas Eve. Of all of the day's top stories for you when we come back after this short break. Don't go anywhere.
There's always more to the news.